Welcome to Burnout and Beyond podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. I am Victor Bartley, your host, and in this space, we explore the complexity of burnout, the recovery journey, and prevention measures in the lives of people. Burnout syndrome is not anything new, but has been an existing pandemic within mainstream culture. Leaders in various industries have faced this in silence, but we want to encourage every listener that you are not alone, and burnout is an invitation to begin again. Today's episode is one for the books. David Fraser, a law enforcement officer, gives us the inside scoop, y'all, on how burnout impacts those in the police system. Let's welcome David. Hello, and welcome again to Burnout and Beyond, a podcast where we explore the impact that burnout has on leaders in various industries, and we explore their journey to learn more about how they recover and even ways that we can prevent it in our own lives. And so today we are grateful to have join the space with us today, David Fraser III. Welcome, David.
Hey, Victor, how you doing?
Man, I am well, man. I'm super glad that we're able to have you on today. And we share a history. We have a history together, and in ministry and as pastors. And but I know that you have transitioned, and you're making deep impact, man. So just introduce the people to who you are and what you do.
Well, hello, everyone. As Victor said, I'm David Fraser III. Currently, what I do right now, I am a fraud detective for Dekalb County Police Department in the state of Georgia. And I am also a crisis/hostage negotiator for the same agency. I've been doing this since about 2017. Occupationally speaking, on a personal note, I'm a husband and a father, and I love my family. I have my faith. That's pretty much it. I just try to serve my community the best I can.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, we
Mhm.
we appreciate your service in the civic space, and deeply still have memories of the time that we shared even in the faith space as well.
Mhm.
Man, so tell us a bit about, I know in um, the departments of correction and police departments and affiliated agencies, these times have been really tense. The
Yeah.
relations between the citizens and the police, and just a lot of various things that have come to light, and so on and so forth. And I just wanted you to shed some light on if this season from 2020 and on has impacted you, or if you've had experience with burnout prior to this.
Hmm. I appreciate you asking, Victor. Honestly, I can say that the answer is probably twofold. If we
Okay.
could split your question into two, I'd say
Yeah.
yes to both. Yes,
Okay.
this season involving COVID and not just COVID-19, but just the relational tie between the police departments across the country and the communities that they police, it's gotten rough. And we as law enforcement officers definitely have a serious part to play in that. I can humbly state that. And in addition to that, I think going back to even before I entered into law enforcement, I think those those different tiers kind of combined together to create an amalgamation of burnout in my life, dating back to 2016. And I'll share that with you. For those
Yeah,
of you who are
please.
unfamiliar, I was a pastor, as Victor stated. In fact, Victor and I, we used to be associate ministers together at the Weston Seventh-day Adventist Church in Atlanta, a part of the South Atlantic Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And during that time, we worked. We came in every day. It was a lot of hard work. You remember, Victor, but it was a lot of good work. But it wasn't until I was sent to South Carolina and I was appointed or assigned to district, what they called it, a two church district. It just basically means that I pastored two churches at the same time. And that was when it started. It's very difficult to give attention as a minister to one church. And when you have to give attention, the appropriate amount of attention needed to two churches, it can be a significant challenge. And I think for me, the biggest challenge was emotionally. We often give so much of ourselves that we don't have enough left for ourselves, if that makes sense. It's kind of a paradox, but we often stretch ourselves so thin. And I found myself going here and coming there, and pretty soon I realized that I had no outlet, that I had no time for myself, that I wasn't getting adequate rest, and that I was even dealing with a little bit of insomnia, which I think was related to the stress I carried as a minister. And I think those things all kind of mixed together, like I said, to create a type of exhaustion that I can't even put into words. And so I sat there and I evaluated my life, and I realized that I was happy to give myself to my community, but it was frustrating in the sense that I felt I could personally be doing something that utilized my specific skill set a little bit better. And so I think that was in part what led to my stress as well. And so I made the transition from pastoring to law enforcement going into 2017. And this is where things really took a turn for the worse, because I never took time to rest between my transition from pastoring to law enforcement. And when I say rest, that's really a loaded word. I mean that in a lot of ways. I mean that in terms of
for us, man.
I mean that in terms of taking personal time to reflect on my previous experience before going into the next experience. I mean, taking time to actually get away. You know, oftentimes we just don't take enough vacations as a society anymore. We're just ingrained to work and work and work. And I had not removed myself from my work in 3 years when I started policing. And so I was tired in more ways than I thought were possible at the time. And that was also going through an incredibly difficult hiring process with policing. A lot of people may or may not know, but when you become a law enforcement officer, it's not like you submit an application and then you get the job. You go through probably at a minimum, depending on the agency you're applying for, a 7-step process that starts with an application that's probably 30 pages, that asks for references that date all the way back until you were 18. So in my case, I was 27 at the time, so I had to dig approximately 9 years into my history. And so it took weeks just to complete the application. And then from there, there's polygraph tests and psychological evaluations and physical fitness tests and all sorts of things that you have to do to demonstrate that you are able to take on the job of being an officer. And so when I did finally get through the hiring process, I think it was 6 months, and that was fast. You know, I call it grace, favor, blessings, but that was really fast. It usually takes about a year for most people to get through. And I was told in approximately a month my academy date would start, but that until my academy date started, they wanted me to work as a police cadet for the department, doing different errands, getting initiated to how policing works. And so I spent my time in police supply for my agency, handling the exchange of different police equipment as officers came in. And it was humbling. It was a lot of hard work, a lot of heavy moving. And then from there, we started academy. And I won't go into every single detail because I don't want to scare you guys, but police academy is a lot like military boot camp. There's a lot of yelling and screaming and running and initiating. And it's all to prepare young officers for the stress that they'll face on the street. And so I didn't get a lot of sleep. I had to do a lot of things every night that required very minute attention to detail, from from how I had to shine my boots with polish until I could see myself, until for making sure that I'd be able to handle the 6 mile run the next morning. And so, and we took and I'll add in, by the way, that we took many tests, written tests based on state law, based on local law, based on federal law, to make sure that we had an understanding of the laws that we were called to enforce. And so I was 100% committed, but I didn't know that I was running on reserve power at that point. I was already tired from ministry. And so I was running on reserves. Wow. And I recall distinctly that I would stay late. I always believed that we should put our best foot forward in everything that we do. So I would stay late every day after academy to study different laws, to study different codes and signals. And in case any of you don't know what that is, police officers often communicate on the police radios in a different language of sorts, that is derived of codes and signals. Signals is how we're assigned calls. Codes is how we answer. So I used to spend hours studying codes and signals to make sure I was fluent in this bizarre language. I would spend hours running outside of academy to make sure that I could pass the physical fitness test. I did thousands of push-ups and sit-ups and pull-ups. And so when I finally graduated, I was actually awarded the highest honor that you can receive as a police recruit going into the force. And I was honored, and we had a big party to celebrate. I want to say at least 100 people showed up. It was awesome. And the entire time I was at the party, I felt miserable. Wow. I felt so tired. And I was like, I'm supposed to be enjoying this. This is supposed to be my celebration for entering into this new phase of life. And I was so happy to see all my loved ones. And I'm sad to say, I just couldn't wait for it to be over because I was so drained. And the day after, we got an email saying it was a Friday, and we got an email on Saturday saying on Monday, report for additional training. We all have to undergo a type of paramedic type training approximately a week after we graduate to make sure that we can, care to people who get injured in our specific duties. And so we were told to report to that training called First Responder for a week. And First Responder, I felt like I was in medical school. I was learning things that I had no background in. And so my mind was just totally warped, hundreds and hundreds of PowerPoint slides. That's all I remember. And then when all was said and done, the next, that Friday, it ended in that Monday, they said, all right, report for field training. And I then spent approximately 10 weeks riding with a field training officer who graded every single thing I did, how I spoke to people, how I responded, how I drove, how quickly I responded to calls when we were dispatch calls. One of my field training officers even required for me, he said, well, if you're a police officer, you have to know how to get around, and you can't rely on GPS because it could not work, and you could have to get to where you're trying to get to. And so I was required to read a map. And so I would imagine getting dispatched a person shot call, and you have to take out a map and try to figure out which way you need to navigate. And I felt so sorry for Columbus and Magellan, just thinking about my own personal experience. But I say all that to say that when I finally was released from field training and they said, you are officially a sworn officer who is free to go and patrol on your own, to respond to calls as they are dispatched, to make arrests as you see fit based on the law and your discretion. When I was finally given that full authority, I was exhausted. I was so tired. I became very, very grumpy. I would distance myself from my family. I would come home and I wouldn't want to engage in long conversations with my best friend, who is my wife. I wanted to play with my kids and take them places, but I was too tired to do so. Wow. And at the end of it all, I found myself questioning everything. I found myself questioning my relationships. I found myself questioning my own efficacy, my own self-esteem. And I'm sad to say I found myself questioning my faith. and all because I had just took on too much to the point that I become burned out.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, man. You have wow, you shared a lot with us and given us a insider scoop, um, not just into your life, but into the process of law enforcement. There are some people that only understand law enforcement from their experiences and those negative experiences. There are others that only understand it from the news, the reports that
Mm-hmm.
come from news media outlets as well as civilian media outlets through social media, videos that go viral, and so on and so forth. And you're showing us a different angle to this thing that I'm not sure many know outside of those that have gone through it. And this has been a gem what you shared, and even more to be able to share just the impact that burnout had on you at each of those stages. Wow, man, I'm really just blown away by your story. So as you've gone through this and you're able to assess your burnout, um, how have you seen others, your colleagues, experience burnout as well?
Well, I got to tell you, it hasn't always been pretty because of the line of work
Mm,
that I'm in. I would
yeah.
say the most common thing that I see is people leaving, people quitting. Law enforcement has one of the highest turnover rates in the country. Estimate that when a person begins law enforcement, it is a 90% chance that within 2 years they will not be a law enforcement officer anymore. And
Wow.
so a lot of people that I graduated with have ended up in other professions. They have ended up simply quitting in general. And I even had one colleague that had ended up in prison. And so the stress that it takes on law enforcement officers is not to be understated. I will say
Wow.
that it's also common, and I'm sad to say this, but I see it often that it can affect how we interact with the public. I have seen coworkers who have not slept in days just because of how their shift was structured, and then will respond to an emergency incident in which somebody is physically trying to attack us, or somebody has been shot, a child has been mortally wounded, and we'll tend to that call, and then we'll go to another call involving a person who just has probably a more minor complaint. And in seeing that, what I've noticed is that the person with the minor complaint may get the buildup of no sleep plus the
Wow.
trauma of the call that we
Wow.
went to before, and you'll find officers overreacting, underreacting, speaking to people. I just don't think an officer should speak to a person. And sadly, as we've seen in the news, sometimes committing acts of physical violence against somebody who probably deserved better treatment. And so I can say that burnout can have very costly effects on law enforcement and the public that we are sworn to protect.
Wow. 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 Man, that's the emotional component. And we understand the history of law enforcement, at least in this country, and just the racial tension realities that are a part of it. And as a black man, it can be easy to just assume that this is just a race thing, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
while we aren't here to discuss how much that's included in it, you're
Mm.
bringing a component that's very pertinent that we all can relate to, in that we've not operated at our best when we're emotionally unbalanced and
True.
unstable.
Hmm.
And that's just a critical component to have perspective on, as you've illuminated. It just from the sleep deprived parent, to the nurses and hospital staff, to the law enforcement agency, like at some point, each of us have experienced some season or some spurt where sleep has been very limited, and trauma thrown on that. Trauma can vary in degrees, but trauma thrown on that just puts us in a very bad space very naturally.
I agree.
And so,
Mhm.
yeah, just that, and not having awareness and of your emotional state and paying attention to it and mindfulness can just easily throw you into that next natural spiraling emotional curve, so to speak, of poor choices and less than optimal responses. And wow, that's just incredible perspective that you added um, to the to the discussion as it relates to this. So in in your work as well, how have you been able to see steps of growth for your own burnout experience? What tips would you provide to those in law enforcement agencies who are going through similar things that you've been through as it relates to burnout?
Well, for me, I think the first question that I had to ask myself was, why am I experiencing the feelings that I'm experiencing or feeling? And I think that we don't take enough time in self reflection. And you can't really address a problem until you assess the problem. And so for me, I took the time to ask myself why, and I realized that I had ideas about what I was supposed to do as a person that were idealistic and unrealistic. And I
Mm,
started to internalize this principle that I live by today. And it's that I am not called to do everything. Plain and simple. I am not called to do everything. It's something that I tell myself over and over again. And I wish it's a principle that I had in my back pocket when I was a minister, because I think for pastors, especially, they
mhm.
are expected to do so many things,
Yeah.
from counselor to teacher to activist. There's so many roles that a minister is supposed to bear. And the truth is, it's similar with policing. I've done everything from giving couples free marriage counseling in the middle of a domestic call to performing CPR on a child. And so, I mean, we have so many different roles and functions that we operate in. And I had to take a step back and realize that I am not called to do everything. I'm called to do what I am here to do. One of my favorite quotes is pursue one great and decisive goal with force and determination. And to me, the key word in that quote is one. I think that too many of us are trying to do too many things at one time. And we don't realize that doing many things poorly really isn't any better than doing one thing very well. And so, as it relates to racial tension and the issues within our community, the Black community with police officers, that set me free from that stress, that principle, because it made me realize I am not here to be a police activist. I'm not here to defend the profession with my arguments, with my social media posts, with my words. Instead, I realized that the best way I could make a difference in my community was by simply doing a job as best I could and holding the people accountable who do it with me, holding those people accountable as well. That to me was freeing, because it meant that I didn't have to respond to every Facebook comment. It meant that I didn't have to react to every video. It meant that I just had to go out there and do the job that God had put in my life, had placed before me. And so to me, I think that was the first step, just realizing that I am not called to do everything. And I think the second step was taking me time. I realized that I had to, you know, there's this old illustration. Whenever you fly on a plane, they always say if the cabin should lose pressure and masks
Yeah.
drop down, you should always put on your mask before you put
Right.
on your child's mask or your lover's mask, whoever you may be traveling with,
Yeah.
because it does neither one of you any good. If you pass out trying to help them, then you both have no mask. And so for me, I realized that I had to take the time to metaphorically or proverbially put on my own mask. And so I read a lot. I love to read. And so I read books. I read a lot of books. And that helps me to clear my mind. I like to go on runs. I haven't been on a run in a little while just because it's been busy lately, but I used to love to go running. That was a good outlet for me. I love spending time with my kids. They're so hilarious and so awesome. And so I started doing things to make sure that I was taking care. I travel now. I'm going on a vacation next week actually, and I can't
Super.
wait. And getting away allows me to really get away. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the beyond the glamour. I told you I'm a crisis negotiator, and beyond the glamour and the Hollywood cameras, crisis negotiators are on call all the time. I'm on call right now. I carry my phone with me. I have when you're a negotiator, you're a part of SWAT team, and I have a SWAT cell phone that I carry with me into the bathroom. I mean, I have it with me all the time, and to remain in a state of being on call all the time is more stressful than most people could ever imagine. So to free myself from that stress, I get away. When I get away, I can't be called if I'm in another state or another country. And so that is my time where I can say, I cannot answer. I won't be there. I won't show up. When I get back, you have 100% of me. But when I'm gone, I've got to look out for myself, my family, and my well-being. And so I think those two things, realizing my own limitations and making sure that I practice self-care, have been powerful, powerful tools in helping me to really come to a place now where I am not burned out. I have the energy to do my job. In fact, I have the energy to give extra. There are many days where I go in early. I told you I'm a fraud detective and I have 100 cases, but I'm not overwhelmed. I can handle those cases, and I can handle those cases because I've learned to do more with less. That makes sense.
It does, man. It does. As you were sharing the first component and tip of of not trying to be everything, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
this in the book by Dr. Rita Walker. She talks about not shoulding on yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that we spend so much time, sometimes unconsciously, saying should, or verbally even at times saying I should be doing this,
Mm-hmm.
or this would should, and just that idea of what should be can place a burden on us that we should never. Right there, I used it again. It just
Yeah.
shouldn't happen, right? We
Exactly. I get it. I get it.
right, and so as you mentioned that, it just brought that into to very a great focus, on the fact that we are only one person, right? We
Mm-hmm.
the idea of the Marvel comics and the DC comic characters, us embodying them and loving them as a child and wanting to become them, isn't what really happens in life, right? And so we
Yes.
are only
Yes.
human at best.
Mm-hmm.
We're only human at best, and so no, that's absolutely powerful, man. And no, I love what you said in the second part, because one of the things about burnout that sometimes can be misunderstood is that burnout means that you won't have stress, right? It's sometimes just about
Mm-hmm.
knowing how to carry the stress that you do have, right? Having a
Mm-hmm.
load of a
Absolutely.
hundred fraud cases is like, that's a level of stress, but you've learned
Mm-hmm.
how to
Yes.
carry it, right? Knowing how to
Mm-hmm.
carry it the right way is everything. And so, knowing how to put it down, knowing how to step away, knowing how
Yes.
to have your frontal lobe engage when it's stressful, to where you're able to focus and various things. That's all a part of the recovery and prevention process. So I deeply appreciate you highlighting that nuance, that you can function at a high level, that you can do work that is intense, that is stressful, and still keep an equilibrium, still keep a balance, and still be mindful at the same time, man. That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Well, man, David, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have
Absolutely.
you on, man, and we appreciate you representing the law enforcement agencies. And for us that are civilians that don't have any background in it, you shed quite a bit of light for us on the realities that you all face, and the safety, the harm that you all are put into just from an emotional standpoint, not to mention the physical realities that come with the job. And so we deeply appreciate you opening the pages of your story. And we're so glad to hear about even your recovery. And we believe that those that watch this will definitely be inspired to follow in your steps and to practice in their own way, their own burnout prevention and recovery. And so again, we want
Yes.
to thank each of you for joining this episode. And as always, remember, burnout is an invitation to begin again. Peace out. Didn't I tell you? Detective David gave us the business. David encouraged us to take time in self-reflection, to explore our emotions and feelings and get to the bottom of them. The question that David left us with that resonates with me the most is, are there ideas that I have accepted? Are there ideas that you've accepted that are idealistic and unrealistic? What is it that you are expecting yourself to do? What pressure have you put on yourself? Is it idealistic and unrealistic? That's food for thought. I want to thank you for joining this episode of Burnout and Beyond. To see previous episodes, visit the podcast page on victorspeakslife.org. If you or your organization want to grow beyond burnout, share your information by clicking the Book Victor icon. Until next time, live well.